Evolutionary.org presents Evolutionary Hardcore Podcast with your co-hosts, Steve from the American Underground and Mobster from the UK Iron Den. Get ready for the most hardcore and underground info in the industry. And here we go. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6.
Good morning, everyone. Evolutionary.org Hardcore Podcast coming your way. Guys, we have another podcast. This is number 119. William Bonac is who we're doing. Stevesmi here and Da Mobster joining me from across the pond. What's up?
Oh, good.
All right, buddy. So, guys, William Bonac, he's one of the up-and-coming bodybuilders. He got second place last year at the Mr. Olympia, and he's got a chance to win the Mr. Olympia maybe in the next couple years. So, you know, he's a guy to keep an eye on. He may win it in 2020. We're doing this podcast right before the 2020 Mr. Olympia. So, but these are evergreen podcasts, guys. So we're going to talk about his life. We're going to talk about what he cycled, his steroid use. I know you guys want to hear about that. And we're going to talk about some controversies surrounding him as well and how he's been an underdog for the past few years. So, he is from Ghana. The last podcast we had, Mobster and I couldn't remember where he was from. But yeah, he's from a small country in West Central Africa called Ghana. And you can tell that by his accent. If you listen to him, that is an African accent, Central African accent that he has. He migrated to the Netherlands in Europe, and he was born in 1982. So he is still young enough to definitely make some damage in the Mr. Olympia and other competitions. So his stats, 5'7", 255 pounds. He's an absolute beast for that height, obviously. You know, when he was younger, he started lifting weights at a really young age to relieve stress. But it took him a couple decades of hard training. So this is a lesson for a lot of you young guys. You don't just become a big bodybuilder in your teens or 20s. It takes a couple decades of training, of dieting, trial and error, and building that body. That's what bodybuilding is all about, is building a body to get it. So 2011, he really burst on the scene. Third place at the IFB Arnold Amateur. He was an underdog. A lot of guys never gave him a chance. He came on, though. He came on strong. He won his biggest competition in 2015, IFBB Nordic Pro. And then that's when he started getting some action at the Mr. Olympia. 2016, he got 5th place. And then he got 3rd the next year. So, he's been a beast, and he's been killing it. So I actually made a prediction a few years back when I wrote this article. I said that he would take down Phil Heath in the next couple of years. But Phil Heath actually hasn't been Mr. Olympia champion in the past couple of years. So Phil Heath took himself down. But now William Bonac has to take down the other guys who are just edging him the last couple of years. So Bonac has a big social media presence. Just in the past couple of years, his Instagram account has more than doubled subscribers. He's almost to 1 million subscribers on Instagram. So he's got a lot of fans. He does a lot of stuff on his Instagram page. I mean, I have it pulled up right now. He does a lot of promotions for clothing and supplements and all that usual stuff. And he also has he owns at least one company called Bonac Fitness Temple. So he's very, very busy with that. He posts a lot of pictures. He posts a lot of motivational training videos and pictures on his Instagram. And he basically, you can look at his pictures on Instagram, guys. He updates it quite frequently. He's an absolute monster. And even if he doesn't take down the Mr. Olympia, the guy is someone that we should definitely be, taking a look at here at the top levels of bodybuilding. What do you think, Mobster?
I was just going to interrupt you anyway, Steve. I was going to say, as a taller athlete myself, Bonac to me, and I'm not a big fan, as I told you in the pre-show chat, is one of the things that guys can look at. If you are his height, then he's someone you can mimic, he's someone for you to aim for. I'm 6'3". Bonac, you know, is 8, 9, 10 inches shorter than me. So for me, there's not someone I could say compare myself to and say this is the guy that I should look at. But of course, like the under 200-pound Mr. Olympians of yesteryear, he's a short class. He was, in fact, if you might recall, Steve, a 212 athlete at one point before he stepped away from the 212 class and decided he was going to go for it. And in fact, you know, we're going to get into some of his decisions and the controversies, but I would argue, and again, I'm not a fan, he's actually made some right decisions, stepping away from the 212 class and into the Mr. Olympia and getting second place last year and winning the Arnold Classic earlier this year, you know, when everything was just going into lockdown, was the right decision. So, you know, he's had mentors, he's had coaches, etc. But the big decisions, you can argue one way or the other, he's actually made the right decision. And at 5'7", he's definitely someone for the shorter guys to say, this is what I can do, this is what I might be able to imitate and do well for myself. So yeah, 100% there. Yeah, I've already mentioned the Arnold Classic is now in that group of guys that's won one. Now, whether he'll come back and win two, and especially with everything that's going on in a minute, with the competitions, the Olympia's just been moved last week because Vegas looks like it's shutting down or limiting the number. You would have had like 400 people turn up. That's as much as they were going to allow. So that's been moved. Here's the thing. It's the same thing with the world's strongest man. It's going to be a big test for all the athletes with the changes that have taken place in terms of dates and preparation. And if we're going to get into the controversy in terms of his coaching, he's actually taken over his own coaching. I don't think he has anybody that he's being mentored by or being led by anymore. And yet, there we go. Last year's, after leaving his coach, Neil Hill, second at the Olympia. That's second best in the world. And I believe last year would be Brandon Curry, of course, and first at the Arnold Classic, which is the two biggest competitions you can possibly do as a bodybuilder. I want to get into some of his earlier stuff, Steve. I've been, like we do, anybody listen to this podcast, we do a lot of research for these kind of things. And one of the videos I watched was him talking about how in order to become the bodybuilder that he is, and as you say, started age 13 training, and it was 12 years before he even began to take it seriously and consider competing. And I believe it's been another 7 years. So as Steve says, 2 decades in total for him to get to the level where he is now. It's definitely not something you can do fast, guys. There's a lot of big conversations about what's called muscle maturity, but it's an interesting journey. When he made the decision to start looking for sponsorship and become an actual professional bodybuilder, he was, I believe, living with his mum, who was a big part of his life. And he made the decision to step away. And in doing so, he ended up he lost a job. He was doing carpenter on building sites, of all things. Ended up sleeping in his car and got quite depressed. And at one point of the story, it talks about sleeping in a car with a gun. I would have suggested selling the gun if you're that hard done by. But yeah, so there was some big decision making going on there. But fortunately for Bonac, it's paid off. When you're now number one or number two bodybuilder in the world, sleeping in a car might not be necessarily the best decision you've ever made, and the rest of us perhaps would have gone back to mum. But he made that decision. He decided he was going to be a professional bodybuilder. He decided he was going to have a career, and it paid off for him. This is not career advice, guys. You know, get a job, get an education, have that to back you up, and then if you have the genetics, if you have the potential. So William is not necessarily in that particular way something that's 100% good to follow, but he made that sacrifice, and here we are, number 2 in the world, potentially, as Steve says, number 1.
Yeah.
But, go on.
Yeah. So let's get the you know, you kind of segued into, let's get kind of the controversies. I'm gonna let you jump in a second, but let me get his controversy that I have out of the way, and I'll let Mobster jump in. Then we can start talking about the juicy stuff, his training, his diet, and of course his steroid cycles. So you know, a lot of guys in the social media world, they want to basically get views and clickbait and stuff. So they'll go and they'll attack someone, or they'll create a controversy. So he's been involved in that, and he got sucked into that a little bit. And he said in recent months, if you watch some of his YouTube videos, you know, he said, listen, he just doesn't pay attention to that, but he also believes at the same time he has to respond, because if he doesn't respond, then he's kind of accepting it. So he takes that type of approach. when I interviewed Charles Griffin, of course, is Everson Griffin's brother. Everson Griffin, who plays in the NFL, he's a $100 million defensive tackle. His brother, Charles Griffin, I interviewed him. It was on podcast 205 on the regular, my other podcast, the regular Evolutionary Radio podcast. And so if you want to look that one up, but he also said the same thing when I talked to him, and I talked to him after the podcast for quite a while. He's a very eloquent, very intelligent guy. And he said basically, I'd ask him, what do you think about the NFL? Who's going to win? Blah, blah. His brother plays in the NFL, for crying out loud. And he's like, oh, I don't pay attention to that. I'm just focused on bodybuilding. He's just like focused just on bodybuilding. So if you want to succeed at anything, guys, in life, you have to have that mentality. You cannot get sucked in to this social media bullshit. Stay away from social media. Stay away. Unless you're monetizing it, it's helping you pay your bills. There's no reason to even mess around with social media. Focus on your goals, guys. It's so much negativity. And he got into it with some of these social media people. And I'm not even going to name them because I don't want to give them publicity because they're a bunch of assholes. But yeah, so jump in, Mobster. Tell us what you think about that. Tell us about his. On
that particular one, and as you say, we're definitely not giving this guy any traffic whatsoever. So we're not naming and shaming, and you guys can figure it out for yourself. Essentially, what he was saying was, you can create this video which gives you traffic. You can make a name for yourself as some sort of critic. But what he was really pissed off about, and it was kind of true. And again, I'm not a big fan, but it was right again on this example. He says, how is it possible for this guy to use my name, talk about me, and expect no kickback, no response? So he was, I mean, he got a bit aggressive, and perhaps that was a mistake. But essentially said, listen, you can't do this and nothing's going to be said. If you're going to say stuff about me, if you're going to be this negative, and essentially traffic is money, let's be quite brutal about it. This guy gets to comment on him, get lots of hits on YouTube, and make money to use the UK parlance from slagging me off. So it got right into the whole fuck you kind of, see your career finished. No one's going to talk to you. Again, probably a little bit emotional, slightly over the top, but nevertheless, it made some of the social media guys say, listen, if you end up really well, and I'm thinking of a particular person who's actually done quite well for this, you get to do interviews with Olympia level competitors. You don't get that by berating them and slagging them off and making money off of their back and essentially being completely negative in that particular way that happened at the time, and expect no word from the athlete. Why should you? That's what we have press conferences for. That's why you can't just sit there and go, you're an awful human being and expect the athlete to go, fine, thank you very much, next. No. If it was a boxer, it's the kind of thing we've seen, get out there and give that boy a bitch slap. And I think that's probably what William wanted to do. Fortunately, that calmed down. So shall we get into one of the others, Steve? I can think of one very quick one. And there's a lot of controversy. It's just that something he's had to overcome. He injured his leg about 18 months, 20 months ago, and has doubled up on the training, etc., etc., etc. And this is another hurdle that he's had to overcome. And I'm starting to say, the more I say these things, the more of a fan I'm turning into, because he actually has had to deal with some crap, some of his own making, which I'll get to in a second, and some which is like, injuries. Phil Heath with the hernia, and a bunch of other guys with injuries, etc., and things that they've had to overcome. And this is part of being an athlete. You deal with crap in life, you deal with injuries, you deal with maybe, a family member's ill, and you get past and you deal with things. And William's had a few of those. In terms of actual stuff that he's done well for himself, and I'll deal with the controversy in terms of the monetary side of things, which is what it was about. He's actually got a house being built in Ghana right now. And I believe he also owns a gym out there, which is it's not really going to be a money maker, because I think they said the difference between what in Ghana and in Europe, in Holland with the euro, is not going to make him any money whatsoever. But it's a great thing for the community, and there are not many American-style professional type gyms out in Ghana. So he's actually doing some good things out there as well. I want to get into the controversy, which was a big deal and a lot of back and forth. And even the person that won about earlier on kind of touched on it when it was getting a bit out of hand. And that was with Neil Hill, which was his coach, and something of a mentor. And when I say coach, it's both in training with Neil Hill's 3D kind of training, Y3K, and also in the, as he said, basically cycle and supplemental advice. And the gist of it was essentially that there was a big falling out over how much money he was supposed to be getting, and it got a bit confusing. And I suspect there was probably an element of being tired, coming into a competition, being carb depleted, and a big misunderstanding. But the mistake, and you actually mentioned with Instagram earlier on, was to go on Instagram and really kick off. And it was something incredibly stupid in terms of he was claiming that Neil Hill was taking 40% of his earnings, and Neil Hill quite rightly pointed out and said, I've actually got signed contracts, so I can show you emails, I can show you screenshots of my phone. I was taking 20% of his contest winnings and 20% of his bonus money. And the two things together doesn't add up to 40%. It's simple maths. But one suspect was carb depleted, it kind of did. And perhaps I think it was because William was starting to make a name for himself, starting to move up the rankings. So what was small amounts of money when you win 10 grand suddenly becomes a big deal when you're winning 100 grand. You're not giving away $2,000, you're giving away $20,000. And they started to separate, they started to pull away. But as I said earlier on, he's gone from arguing about money and his position and the amount of money that I might win from this and the amount of money I might win from that, to do with a coach, to placing second at the Olympia and winning the Arnold. So I don't believe I think there's no other mentor, no other coach, no other guru has been mentioned since that. And here he is doing fantastically well for himself. So again, maybe it shouldn't have been handled the way that it was. He shouldn't have said what it was. And they both said that since. It was a lot of traffic for a lot of forums and social media stuff and whatever else. It looked really, really unprofessional. Even with the more professional approach by Neil to dealing with it, it's still opening up private stuff, opening up business stuff, opening up stuff that you're working with a manager and whatever else. And it was all played out on the internet for the rest of us to glorify ourselves in. But as I say, it's worked out for him because here he is kicking ass. And Steve's quite correct. I mean, the worst position he'll get this year is going to be somewhere in the top 5. And I think Steve's probably also correct in that a lot of other guys get a certain amount of traffic about with their position, and William doesn't get that. And then he comes in a second. So you're going to talk about Big Ramy and all these guys that might be playing, Lee Labrada's son, Hunter Labrada, and where they're going to place. And no one's mentioning William. And we're here on the podcast. We know that he plays second. So why is he not getting that traffic? Why is he not being recognised? For a shorter guy, he's incredibly well-rounded physique. And I think it's kind of weird with 1 million followers on Instagram, etc., that he doesn't get that kind of respect, or he's not in the conversation, and yet he should be.
He doesn't even have a Wikipedia page.
Yeah,
he's the only guy that got in the top 5 that doesn't have. It's so weird how he's an underdog, but I love it. I don't know the guy personally. I never interviewed him. I haven't really I don't form opinions from people unless I really meet them. So,
yeah.
you know what I'm saying?
I didn't.
A lot of this is image, but at the end of the day, I already like the guy just because he's such an underdog.
Yeah.
And he's one of the guys I would cheer for next month when they do have the 2020 Mr. Olympia. But what happened was interesting in the 2018 Mr. Olympia is, remember I was saying at the beginning, we were saying Phil Heath fell off. Phil Heath shockingly got second place, and Sean Roden got first place. And then and William Bonac got fourth.
Yeah.
Winkler got third. Yeah. And then 2019, which was last year, Brandon Curry won, and then William Bonac got a very close second place. So, and Phil Heath, didn't even register. Hadi Chopin got third, and then Dexter Jackson got fourth, and then Winkler dropped to fifth. So, we've seen this the past 2 years. Phil Heath dropped off, and then you have 2 new guys back-to-back years. So maybe in 2020, we'll get a third new guy in a row. Yeah, so we'll see what happens.
I was going to just jump in there and say, with William Bonac, I think, and again, I said earlier on, not a fan, but the more I say, the more you start to think, perhaps it's just the way he's come across, and I didn't like how he came across. He's very, very slowly improving. He seems to be doing it all off his own back. Not a great, he's actually got rid of a guru, and yet everybody else works with gurus and blokes that talk about this and training camps in Kuwait and whatever else. And there's William in Amsterdam in the Netherlands doing his own stuff, building his house, helping out the Ghanaian community, and slowly adding a pound here and slowly adding a pound there, and being consistent. So, you know, the more I say, the better he sounds. Yeah, for sure. Back to you, Steve.
Yeah, so let's get into his training and diet. You're the training guru, Mobster. I'm going to get into his diet really quick. So what we know from his nutrition, guys, remember in that level of bodybuilding, more is better. You're using tons of steroids, tons of drugs, tons working out like a madman, eating like a madman. So his diet is no different. An example of what he would eat for breakfast: oats, eggs, nuts. Very interesting that he talks about that. Because if you tell someone to eat oats, eggs, and nuts, they'll laugh at you and they'll call you a hippie. You know, you're probably some skinny hippie. No, this is what these guys don't eat bacon smothered in oil, okay, for breakfast, like a typical American. Let's fry 3 eggs in refined oil, bacon, hormone raised bacon, thrown in a pan. No, that's what Americans eat. That's why Americans are 300 pounds. This guy, 300 pounds fat. This guy ate clean. He eats clean. He believes in a diet to stay big and get ripped. Very simple diet. Complex carbs, potatoes, oats, rice, eggs, fish, meat. Good quality meat, guys. Typical dinner for him: chicken, rice, green veggies. Wow, that's so surprising. It's a cliche, but it works. Okay, it works. It's a very simple diet. It's filling. You're gonna feed your muscles in the process. He also mentions almonds and fats, good fats, also in his diet. Oh, we're scared of fats. No, he eats fats. Fats are not our enemy. Good fats. Bad fats are our enemy. Good fats are not our enemy. So he talks about that, and we see that a lot with nutritions. And when I've interviewed some of these nutrition gurus in prior podcasts, they mention this as well. So a lot of the stuff you might hear out there is not necessarily true, but they eat clean and they eat a lot of good quality natural foods. Yeah. So, Mobster, you're the workout guru. Tell us a little bit about that. Tell us about his workouts. What is this guy doing for workouts? We want to know.
On the food one, guys, there's a day of eating video that we'll probably link to in the podcast, so you can watch that, and it exactly spells out his former girlfriend, now wife, cooking food with William coming in, and it's exactly like Steve says. Seriously, you need to look at it. It's 5, 6, 7 meals a day. I think 5 to 6 is around average, all on there. We'll try to link to that for you in the podcast. Training, it's not actually it's not anything crazy. And it's certainly no big weight. So I deliberately looked at a day of training. It's actually more of a week of training, and a couple of videos to see what he's doing there. It would be, for me, a much higher volume. I mean, we're talking about a minimum of 4, sometimes 6, and very rarely, occasionally 7 different movements per body part. Typically 5 sets, occasionally 1 or 2 more, but the average is around 5 sets. So I'm going to say, I wrote here 4 to 6 movements, 5 sets, 8 to 15 reps. And the videos that I've seen, and they're in the last 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, all the videos I looked at before a big competition. We're not talking about 4 plates aside benching or 5 plates aside bent over rows. It's moderate weight. 5 or 6 movements, as I say earlier on, 4 to 6 movements, and 8 to 15 reps. There's occasionally a bit of a pump set at the end. He does train with a buddy. In fact, on one of the videos, which I believe is from late last year, he has trained with this particular guy for over 10 years. And he's not, he looks like he might have done some sort of low-level competitions. He's got a physique, not in William's class, but they're obviously good training together. And I think one of the things that Steve actually referred to in his article, which we can get into, is his arms. I think something specific that Steve looked at. He does have, and again, he doesn't have any really great, crazy, outstanding body parts, and yet his arms are world class. And it's a relatively simple approach even for arms. I think you said in the article, Steve, it's a bit of machine work in there for arms. And I think I think you again referred to it, and I've certainly seen something somewhere else, over 22 inches, which at 5'7" is just crazy. He does have a very good peak. His triceps are good, but the peak to his biceps, what probably carries that arm off really well with it, and a decent tie-in. There's not too short on the tendon there. It hooks into the forearm, and so you get that kind of almost filling the gap up, not quite, ever so slightly shorted head on the biceps there, and good forearms. So I mean, the video I watched this morning specifically was a back workout video, and we're talking about pull downs, lever rows, low lever rows, low cable row. You've got a mid-range kind of row machines. It was all machine work. I don't think I saw any free weights. I don't think, I mean, as I said, for his legs, I don't think he does a back squat. He actually credits front squats. Again, this is in Steve's article. So, but looking at the videos that I have seen and doing the research, a lot of machines. There's some hammer strength type stuff, etc. Though over in Holland, I think these are like a local brand that he's using. And again, the stuff that he does in the videos, and perhaps that's not the same as what you sometimes see in the magazines. There are no crazy 200-pound dumbbells. There's no, using a whole stack on every single thing, but good form. And let's not let's judge or don't judge. It's working for him with his genetics, with his putting. I mean, again, these are 4-week out videos. He's got a good, damn good sweat on in the back workout. He's wearing a t-shirt the whole time. There's no stripping off and posing or any of that kind of stuff. But you can see the lat muscles. You can see the depth. You can see the thickness. That was the one other thing I recall as well from his training. And the back is a good example again. Similar to Ronnie Coleman, one back workout is specifically for width, and one back workout is specifically for thickness. And again, in his particular case, the training that he's doing is working for him. So a bit of advice for you then, guys. Stevesmi and I don't train the same. I guarantee that we don't train the same. Steve would have way more volume than me. And again, William's approach to training would be much higher. I'm not a bodybuilder, but a much higher volume. And yet I weigh what I weigh, and I can do what I do as a strength athlete. You need to find, these things are all of a bit of a template. You can go at what William does, look at what he does, take some of those bits of information, some of what he does, and adapt it to your training. The advantage, and Steve mentioned it earlier on, of doing 20 years, is that after 20 years, you know what works, you know how the muscles should feel, you know how any advice that he might have got earlier in his career from coaches like Neil would be how to get the little nuances out and stuff like that. And he needs to have learned that. If he has learned it, then you don't need someone telling you every 5 minutes. So it's how to get the best out of an exercise. And in fact, if that's probably the best piece of advice I could give you, if you're going to watch William's workouts, he's learned how to get the best out of himself. And that's what you should learn by watching what he does. You don't need to do 6 movements. You might need to do 3. He does 8 to 15 reps. You might find 6 to 12 reps works for you. So look at what they do. You do not have to ape it. You don't have to do exactly what they're doing in order to get that. But look, again, he's a shorter guy. And if you've got any similar genetics, there's a lot of stuff out there. If you pick the bones over and say, listen, if it's working for William at 5'7", and I'm 5'6", I'm 5'7", 5'8", whatever, maybe this kind of workout will be really, really good for me. But again, he's not pounding this stuff. It's not 200-pound dumbbells. It's not 300-pound bent over rows. It's not weights pinned to the stack kind of workouts. It's just putting the work in, doing the grind, and then relying on the diet to bring you into condition. Yeah, back to you, Steve.
Yeah, and I've actually learned a lot from guys like William Bonac on training. But no, obviously, these guys, if you train like them, you'd end up injured. If you ate like them, you'd end up obese. And if you ran the steroids that they run, you'd probably shorten your lifespan quite a long time. So these guys have the genetics to back up all the stuff. They do this full time. This is what they do. Yeah. You're not going to be able to train like Tom Brady and then win 6 Super Bowls. It doesn't work like that. If that was so simple, so many people would have done it by now. It's just not that simple. So, and then with this, but it's training you can learn. Like Mobster said, I actually learned from just doing these guys training. But you can't train exactly like them. But you can learn from what they train, like the front squats, the machine work to kind of on the biceps just to get some nice pumps. It's more of an ego thing with me. You just get those nice pumps. You walk around the gym with those pumped up biceps, and you give yourself a nice ego stroke that way. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? And then you go to the supermarket with your arms all popped up. Why the fuck not? We're all fucking narcissists. Fucking do it. So jump in, Mobster, and then we'll get into a steroid.
Guys, so something that you see more and more and more from every aspect of the professional athlete. So not just bodybuilding, pretty much from pro ball that Steve's mentioned, basketball, it's strongman. Every athlete I know now that's at a professional level, the thing that you would have noticed the last couple of years, and I think Steve would agree with me, is recovery is everything. And I mean every single thing, from cryotherapy to deep tissue massage. I don't think there's a top athlete out there that's not getting a massage at least once a week, if not twice a week or more. That in strongman and in bodybuilding, we're seeing the ice baths, so helping with recovery. We're seeing cryotherapy in terms of the actual cabins that you step into, and it's like minus 20, minus 40, whatever kind of crazy below zero temperatures to help you for 2 minutes, just to help with recovery. They are doing active recovery. You're training once, sometimes twice a day, 2-3 times a week. These guys are spending a half an hour, 45 minutes, an hour doing recovery stuff too. Now, that's one of the few things I'm not seeing any information on, funny enough, with regards to Mr. Bonac himself. But I would probably say it was almost certainly a given. When Steve sees this stuff as a career, we're talking about, honestly, 8 or 9 hours a day. How many hours a day for eating? Training is really at the most, and that's if you do 2 sessions. If you do 1 session, it's really, of a professional body, it's an hour. But you're doing other aspects of business. But some of that time a day is actually spent in specific recovery, whether it's hot yoga, whether it's stretching, whether it's massage, whether it's cryotherapy. That is a big, big thing for all professional athletes, not just bodybuilders. So one of the few things is there's no information on there as far as William's concerned, but I'd say it's almost certainly a given. I would put probably 2-3 hours a week to one side, in William's case, set aside for active kind of recovery type stuff to get through these workouts. And again, Steve says quite properly, and when we get to the steroids, the same thing again. The genetics of the individual is how they're going to respond to all these things. William is a genetic freak. He is a big guy for 5'7", big muscular guy, and you do not get to the levels of competition that he's done without those genetics. So bear that in mind. But again, recovery is something that you can put into your lifestyle. If you're serious about your training, stretch. If you're serious about your training, look at hot yoga. If you're serious about your training, even if it's only once a month, go off and get a massage, get the back realigned, get everything put back in place, because you're pushing and pounding on this stuff. And again, we've touched on this in previous podcasts. Look after yourself, guys. Don't get nothing torn or ripped or strained or crush your disc or whatever. Let's get into the steroids, Steve. That's the meat and potatoes of all these podcasts, what people like to hear about.
Yeah, so we have a little over 20 minutes left, so we're definitely going to spend the rest of this talking about this.
Yep.
Now, the steroid use is not really a big surprise at this level, obviously. It's chemical warfare. It really is. The question is, though, compared to 10 or 15 years ago, are guys getting more smart when it comes to steroid use? Are they getting more efficient when it comes to steroid use? And even are the steroids today better than they've been in the past? We went through a period of time in the 90s where steroids, good quality steroids, was hard to get if you were, because there was so many people, selling bad gear. And nowadays, I think the gear that we see now, if you sell bad gear now with all the forums out there, like our forums, if you sell bad gear, you're gonna get caught. You're gonna get caught. You know what I'm saying? Because people talk, people network about this stuff. It's not like it used to be before all these hardcore forums like Evolutionary.org came around.
Yeah.
So the question is, are the dosages going up or are they going down? So in William Bonac's case, it's a question of, how efficient is he? So HGH, insulin, those two together, an absolute must. If you're going to be 5'7", 255 pounds, mobster, and ripped, you've got to run the HGH and the insulin together. You can't run just the insulin and you can't run just the HGH. If you run just the HGH at these numbers, your blood sugar is going to skyrocket. If you run just the insulin by itself, you're going to store fat. Insulin is a storage hormone. So if you run them together, it's like peanut butter and jelly. Now you're getting dead. So the way these guys incorporate HGH and insulin is very simple. They'll run a crap load of HGH. They'll run the insulin along with it, okay? And then they'll eat their meals. And then their body will shuttle in all that food that they're getting because they eat an insane amount of food.
Yeah.
And it will store that into the muscle and basically feed your muscle. I don't want to say store in the muscle. That's not really, I don't want to misconstrue that, but it basically feeds the muscle. You're feeding that muscle. You're getting that muscle growth to be able to manipulate that to exceedingly high levels that are not natural, obviously. So that's why they use these PEDs.
Maximize them in intake and maximize them the effects of anything else that you're doing food wise. You're getting 100% or as close to 100% as you can try and get, as opposed to, say, for example, a normal guy maybe getting 60 or 70%, and that's with a less than perfect diet. And in terms of the steroid stuff, again, this is 100% something that Newey was involved in. He specifically says in one of the videos about the whole controversy that we mentioned earlier on, that I was planning, and he uses a word, and I can't remember the word right now, but essentially I think he says he was planning the cycles and he was planning the nutrition as well as the training. So it was all being covered. I think Steve's quite correct when he says about the chemical warfare. The question is William, in terms of these things, doing this stuff all year round? The clever way would not be to go crazy all year round and just build up to the competitions. And as we mentioned in previous podcasts, have a clearing out and whatever between competitions when you have time off. I don't know what William's particular scenario is out there in regards to, does he have time off? Like we've mentioned on some of the top bodybuilders we mentioned in previous podcasts, having 3 months, sometimes as much as with the Kevin Levrone, one that's coming out soon, guys, 9 months off. Now, I don't know if there's a situation with William. Something else that probably has changed and is not mentioned when Steve wrote this article a couple of years ago, but would be included now, I think, would be peptides. And again, this is stuff that's come on in the last couple of years. Availability is much easier. Again, I'm old enough, and it's literally the last 2 years when this stuff was difficult to get hold of. And now there are magazine adverts in UK bodybuilding magazine. I think there's only one print magazine now, and it's 4-page, it's two-page adverts, full-size adverts for 2 peptide companies in a UK bodybuilding magazine. So that's how commonplace that's become. And of course, all of our sponsors, certainly the 3, the 2 specific steroid ones, and our sons are doing stuff with peptides that you can get an availability there. So something that's probably what would be included in a cycle now. And with regards to injuries, and I mentioned the leg injury earlier on. What about the amounts here, Steve? I'm looking at the cycle that we're talking about here, and everything's coming up to about 4 grams a week in total with the cestipionate, enfenate. That's 2.5 grams right there. Another gram of mastodon to 3.5 grams, and with the ancillaries and other bits and pieces that we've got to take in with a couple of orals here, it's about 4 grams a week. Certainly 3.5, 4 grams a week, which would be, for me, an absolutely god-awful amount. But when you're 250...
I think it'd be, I listen, if I take gear, even like over a gram of gear, I just, I feel like crap. But these guys are just...
That might be why he came across so grouchy when I was saying about how he came across being bad. I'm thinking, if you're training like a demon, you're wearing yourself out, you're having the same food all the time, which we know he does, and then you're taking steroids to make you grouchy. It's no wonder he's torn someone and who else social media and falling out with his manager or whatever else. And maybe, he's not happy smiley. Some guys handle it better. But here he is producing the goods. He's 255 pounds at 5'7" and plays on the size what he places and winning competitions. Yeah. So in his particular case, and with the things that he's done with his money, it's been worth it. But for the rest of us, 4.5, 5 grams a week, no. Just no, people. You do not need. This is the one thing I was to take. We can look at what we think is taken, and I think this is reasonably accurate. But if you're an average Joe, you do not need to do 4.5 grams a week to William Bonac like. It's not going to happen. You're not going to feel good. But again, he's rolling the dice. He said, listen, for me to get to the level that I've got at, I'm prepared to do this. I'm prepared to spend this amount of money. I'm have this stuff supplied to me, etc., etc. And it's paid off. What's the second prize at the Olympia? $90,000, $80,000, $90,000. Yeah. The Arnold's $1,000. So that's 2 competitions in 12 months, $190,000. In English, that's £150,000. That's about 6 times the average income. Bang! It's worth the money. And it's the only issue here would be the long-term stuff. Well, I mean, we're looking here, as I said, I'll read out the other bits and pieces, and they're 125 milligrams a day. Now, for 99% of our listeners, 50 milligrams is a sweet spot. But this is stuff that he can leave in longer. You're not going to get absolutely huge on any VAR, but it's going to help with your strength. And I believe in this particular example, it would probably be great as a hardener, part of that particular process. Wind strong, 100 milligrams a day. Cardarine was suggesting, again, this is something in the last few years, 30 milligrams a day. And a normal dosage for that, as Steve would tell you, is 20 milligrams. More than enough. But we're not Olympia level athletes. We don't have their genetics. So here's something again. And we've got here T3, 100 micrograms a day. And I believe actually that's a little bit towards the higher end. But again, this is pre-competition stuff. In the case of the testosterone cypionate, 1500 milligrams, you're stopping 3 weeks before competition because it's so long acting. There's probably going to be some manipulation of other bits and pieces in there. And again, I always said, we didn't mention in when this article was written, but peptides for sure. I think it'd also be one of these things where, and again, this is a bit of advice for you guys, any of these drugs, any of the peptides that are out there, I would want to run something 6 months. I would actually probably want to run some of this stuff out of competition. Certainly if I was just thinking of competing, just to see how my body responds. What a lot of gurus are able to do when they're giving the advice to these kind of athletes is they take stuff in and take stuff out, and they're asking almost for daily uptake photographs. They want to update. They want to see what you look like. They want to see how your body responds. Now, the issue is health, because you're looking amazing on stage. Send me that photograph. Oh my God, your abs are popping. We'll carry on doing that drug that we're doing. But it might be at a level that's excessive for 90% of our listeners. It might be a level that makes the rest of us sick or ill. It might be run for way longer than Steve and I would recommend. But it's all about how this guy's going to look on stage, and if he keeps that condition. So that you have to bear that in mind when you're looking at steroid cycles like this. This is for a superior genetic athlete who's placing very high, winning the two placing high in one and winning the 2 highest level competitions in the world. Who's made, as I said earlier, something like $190,000 just from those 2 competitions, who's willing to pay the price. If you're a typical Joe, you don't need 5 grams a week. You don't need to be doing the excessive doses that we mentioned, and your response to them is not going to be even close to what Williams is. Without taking anything away from what I thought of him earlier on, he is a genetic freak, and part of being a genetic freak is the response to PED use, and even just the long-term health. Some guys are going to be made ill with jaundiced skin, and another guy, it's like water off a duck's back. It means nothing, 0 problem. Some guy can run this for 8 weeks and be ill. Another guy can run it for 16 weeks and feel fine. And that's the individual response. Something that Steve talks about often. And when we're giving that advice on the forums, I would agree with. I hope that William would do something like this, looking at the bloods, getting results. And this is where the gurus come in again, where they can sit down, look over your results, look at how you're responding, look at whether you feel ill, whether you're grumpy, whether the food's coming in, whether your skin's glowing, whether muscles are popping, whether you look flat, everything. And that's where a guru, the second eye, it's very difficult for a bodybuilder to do this, but the second eye comes in and looks at you, and they're not grumpy, they're not carb depleted, they're almost taking like a doctor, taking a step back, and a guru comes in and is able to do that. Whereas sometimes when you're competing, you're trained, you ache, your missus is getting on at you, the food's tedious, and the steroids, you're grumpy just from the steroids, you're grumpy from the multiple injections, daily injections. God damn, I feel like a pincushion, and all that kind of stuff. You're not able to look at yourself properly, and this is where a guru comes in. So we do this stuff when we're doing the podcast. It's very easy for us because we're not doing this stuff. We're not training like this. Is not a 9 hours a day thing for me, Steve. It's much, much easier.
Yeah. Well, the thing is that with this much steroids, the main issues when it comes to grumpiness is when you don't eat. So, but he's handling it. He's eating.
Yes.
Because like when a baby's hungry, it's gonna cry, it's gonna whine, it's gonna complain. So you give it food, it shuts it up. When a kid is tired, he's gonna whine, he's gonna complain. So you lay him down for a nap, and then he's better. In this case, I'm sure these guys take, and including William Bonac, tons of sleep medications before bed, because it's hard to sleep when you're on this much gear. Your heart rate's always gonna be like boom, 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 nonstop. It's hard to relax. Your GABA levels are gonna be crushed. So I'm sure he's taking some uppers in the morning, taking his caffeine, and then before bed, he's taking his downers. Jump in here, Mobster, what you want to add, and I'm going to kind of go through each one of these steroids, kind of explain why we think he uses these steroids.
Right. So I think the last thing I was going to say in regard to, you just mentioned the sleep stuff, and as a bigger guy myself, I know of a bunch of strongmen and indeed a bunch of bodybuilders, and the William's right up there with 255 pounds on his frame. Sleep apnea. Literally, guys, you get to the point where the weight of your chest, the muscles on your chest and on your back, pushing down in the rib cage, the size of your neck, not being able to lie down in a certain particular way that a normal person does, and again with the gear as well, we want 6, 7, 8 hours sleep, and it doesn't happen. You're not breathing properly, you're not sleeping right. If you're overtrained, that can affect your sleep as well. It's incredibly important. So in terms of a bunch of strongmen, they're 330 pounds as an average. A lot of them are wearing a CRAP mask to force the air in and keep the passageway open and enable them to get a solid 8 hours sleep. I would actually think, in terms of William, one of the ways that you could probably deal with it is you get a bunch of pillows, not just the ones with your head resting on, and you kind of wrap yourself around these pillows and get yourself into as neutral position as possible. It sounds like a dream, guys. Broad-shouldered, huge chest, tiny waist, big thick neck, big thick arms, etc. But it's actually kind of bad to sleep well when you're built like that. So you kind of want one of those bolsters, huge bolster type pillows. Or even if it's just wrapping yourself around a girlfriend, you need that body posture. So there's a bit of advice for you as well. This is very, very important. And, you know, it sounds like a great thing. I woke up one day and I was 300 pounds and my chest was 60 inches. Yeah. Now you've got 4 pillows under your head because your shoulders are so damn wide. Pillow between your knees because of your thighs. And you're having to wrap yourself around 3 pillars just to get your body position exactly right. Otherwise, you're kind of folding in on yourself. So, yeah, 200. I think Steve's correct. I mean, on the food video, we see him having 6 meals, rotating ribeye steak cut into chunks with rice, and another meal is potatoes and salmon, and another meal is chicken and rice mixed in with some vegetables. As Steve said, it's very boring, but yeah, 6 meals a day from when you get up in the morning with the oatmeal. So probably the last meal, you know, just before you go to bed. I believe when I did a calorific count, looking at the video, is up around almost 6,000 calories a day, which is more than I eat. And I outweigh him by 45, 50 pounds, if not more. So yeah, this is difficult. It sounds great, but it's actually hard work. And the sleeping is that's difficult too. The body being built like that is not actually as comfortable as you think it would be in bed, even at 5'7". So yeah, let's just finish this to steroids off.
Yeah, and then that ties into metabolism. His metabolism, he's eating a lot. So calories in, calories out, you know, is true. But the calories out thing is what people screw up on because they think that your calories out stay the same, and that actually goes up and down. So if you're eating a lot, you're taking all this T3, your calories out is going to be much higher than people assume. So this is why fat people can't lose weight, because they get calories in, but they don't know how much calories out is coming out, and they're a lot less than they think. So in his case, that's why that T3 is taken. The T3 keeps his metabolism strong. He's spitting out, that thyroid. The thyroid is working like crazy. He's getting it out. So that's why, we think he used that. The Cardarine would help him with fat loss and endurance. That's why we think he's using that. The Winstrol, 100 milligrams a day, especially closer to his competition. It's a drying agent. It's going to dry him out. It's a DHT derivative, dry ahead of the competition. Very, very important. There's no benefit to having any water in those joints. You want to dry it out as much as you can. Yeah, Anavar, great oral, non-aromatizing, just like Winstrol. No water retention on it. It's going to help him. It's going to help him, with the lean muscle mass and no water gains. That's why he loves it. The Masteron is a hardener. Great hardener, a gram a week, up to the competition. Obviously, using propionate. They're not going to use enanthate. In most situations, they like to keep things flexible. The Trenbolone, a gram a week. The Trenbolone is great at boosting insulin resistance in the body. Makes your body like a sponge. It works with that HGH and insulin. So as Mobster was alluding to earlier, you eat a big meal, okay? Now, to a normal person, you eat a big meal, your body's going to store that meal as fat. But when he's on all these different drugs and steroids and T3 and the Cardarine, it's going to go in the body and it's going to be shuttled. It's going to be like a sponge. and it's going to be shuttled in the body where he's able to take advantage of that meal. So the way these guys think, their mentality, the way these guys think is they don't want to waste the meal. If they eat a meal without being on the HGH, without being on the insulin, to them, that's a waste. Without being on the trend, that's a waste because you're not able to fully take advantage of that meal. So to maintain that size at his height is
can't afford to waste it.
It's impossible without all this stuff. He needs the stuff to stay that big. It's impossible. You can't. An average person at 5'7", 255 pounds is like 40% body fat. They're freaking morbidly obese.
Yeah.
And he's able to stay huge and lean. It's genetics, but it's also what he's taking. And then let me just finish up with the testosterone. The testosterone is in there. They did not use testosterone back in the day. And a lot of people in Asia, especially, don't use testosterone even to this day. They didn't have AIs. He does. He has access to the aromatase inhibitors. He's using the aromatics. He's using the aromasin, and he may even be using the letro, depending on what his coach wants to put him in, to dry him out, so he doesn't have to worry about the water retention. But if you at home run 1,500 milligrams of testosterone sip without an AI, you're going to turn into a bloated fish. You'll gain 15, 20 pounds and look like a bloated fish. Okay. So yeah, it's completely different. So I'll let you, Mobster. We have a couple of minutes. Finish out the show with your thoughts on that.
I'm going to jump in here. I think the thing is, in terms of accessibility to drugs, it's pretty much the same for everybody. So when Steve's talking about the food and maximizing that with insulin, et cetera, it's going to come down to, right, every single person that you're up against is a genetic advantage compared to the average guy. Every single person has attributes around them that makes them a great athlete or an especially good bodybuilder. And you don't want to give a single feel away. So what does it come down to? It comes down to having the same exercise drugs, same exercise training, making the least amount of mistakes, maximizing, as Steve says, the intake with every single drug, every single meal. And honestly, when you hear some athletes talk about it, it's not just bodybuilders, when they say that I think Dorian Yates actually said this, something like, there was no way that no one could beat me because I knew that I trained the hardest. I knew that when he was actually talking about drugs and nutrition, every single thing had been on point for 51 weeks prior to the competition, and no one had done this, not made a single mistake. No one could have done every single thing that I'd done for 51 weeks, 52 weeks, whatever, and never missed a meal, didn't fuck up on the drugs, didn't fuck up on the supplements. Training was on point. And that's what it's going to come down to. The accessibility of these things, it's probably, we can get hold of these things on the forum through our sponsors. So we have the same accessibility to good drugs as the top bodybuilders in the world. There's this idea sometimes that they're getting secret stuff. No, they might be getting pharmaceutical stuff. They might be getting stuff prescribed to them by a doctor that's been made in a compounding pharmacy, but pretty much everything else is the same as what we can get hold of. And therefore, it's going to come down to not, and I'll be crude here, not fucking up, doing everything on point all the time. And I used the phrase the other day in a podcast when I said it's like monk-like stuff. It's kind of not, it's not romantic. It's kind of tedious. Having the same 3 protein sources every day, 4 if you include eggs, every fucking day. For me, that would drive me absolutely crazy. But again, if I'm going to win 100,000, if I'm going to win the Mr. Olympia, that's $400,000 fucking dollars. Sugar-coated dog shit, people. $400,000. I'm going to eat the same fucking meat every day if that's what it takes for 6 months. I'm going to do what needs to be done, and that's what we're talking about. The same thing applies to drugs. His accessibility to drugs is no better than it is for me, or is it for Steve? We can get hold of these things. Sponsors do this. Not a problem. But having it on point, having it perfect, having everything optimized and assisted with the food. It's exactly right. The attitude has to be that every single mouthful that I'm putting in, if I'm having these 4 or 5 protein sources, maybe these 3 carb sources, and that's what I'm doing all the fucking time for 16 weeks or 20 weeks, then I want to make sure that every mouthful that I've not been wasted. And if that means I've got to give myself a jab of insulin or some more growth or whatever else to win $200,000, to win $100,000, to win $400,000, then I'll do what needs to be done. And it's a business-like attitude. It has to be. So long as safety's in there somewhere, blood test is coming back, and you doing exactly what you need to do and not too much, then in his particular case, at his level, it's worth chancing. It's worth going for. I think so, Steve.
All right, guys. So we summed it up in this one. The next podcast we're going to be doing, I'll give you a little hint. He's from the Dominican Republic. So you guys can look for that one next week.
Yeah.
All right, guys. So we'll talk to you next week. Keep in touch. Keep the questions and suggestions coming. We have a lot of suggestions on the forums of guys to do. Yeah. We'll be happy to talk about them. Really, really cool. We can learn from these guys, even though we're never going to be these guys. We're never going to be Mr. Olympia. We're never going to be Super Bowl winning quarterback. We're never going to win a Stanley Cup. Okay. But we can learn from these guys, little tidbits here and there, and it can improve us in our workouts and training. Talk to you guys next week. Have a good one.
See you soon.